Okay, now we are on step 2.11.1, which is hooking up all our wiring that we've been running through the printer itself to our front control panel. Now this may look like a lot and it might seem overwhelming, but we're just going to do it one by one and follow the instructions, and it's going to be very simple, wire for wire, and we have nice color coding as well as all these little labels that we're very careful not to damage or remove. It will clearly denote which each wire is. Not to mention it's easy to trace these wires if any did get damaged to what they are and what they control. And we're going to go through these wires explaining what each one goes to and the sensor it does control. And that's just going to give you a lot of background information when you start dealing with like this Marlin controller and the RAMPS board. It's a RAMPS 1.4 board. So we're going to need a couple things. Referring right over here to this, we're going to need that front control panel, which we've already pulled out of the box. And I've got it set aside right over here. So we will go ahead and get this out. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this this control board. All right, first thing is that we use active cooling on the stepper drivers themselves right here. They also have heat sinks on them, and we have a little adjustment right in here that if we need to later on, we're going to talk about in the troubleshooting guide. And that is that little, it's called a potentiometer. And you need a little tiny screwdriver to adjust this. And this adjusts how much current. These can handle 2 amps per phase on these stepper motors. But they are preset from the factory, but depending on how tightly you built your printer, you may need a little more current. So this is where you would actually adjust it. Turning it clockwise, looking straight down on it increases amperage, and counterclockwise, vice versa. Problem is it doesn't take much to overamp these depending on the stepper motor that you're driving. So definitely leave them alone and address this in a troubleshooting guide if you have stepper motor that is stalling or skipping steps. This is where you'll make that adjustment. So a couple things right over here. So you've got the stepper drivers right here for your 4 stepper motors, which would be your X, Y, and Z, and your extruder motor itself. You've got a couple of ribbon cables that come right up here to the front panel, which has a standard knob for interface, so you can rotate and push in. This is your reset button, and your SD card reader is right over here. We've got some connection points right along here, all these little pins right over here, center header pins. We've got our power connector right over here, and then we got some high current outputs right over here, which drive your heater elements, your heated bed and your heated extruder itself, so right in there. So let's go ahead and dive into these individual wires and where they plug in. We're going to pay extremely close attention to the color coding and their pin position itself, just to make sure we get these lined up in there. Now, one thing I mentioned earlier in the build is that we may have to cut a couple of these zip ties and give us some slack on the cables themselves. But because we generally know where they lay, it'll be easy for us to, once we put this back together, to go ahead and tighten them back up right in here and re-zip tie these. Just for this video itself and for ease for these guys behind the camera to actually film this so we can get this very clear, I'm going to go ahead and cut these zip ties so I can pull this loom out a little further, just so we can get a visual on it. Alright, so now that I cut those zip ties and brought this wiring harness on forward, let's go ahead and follow the instructions step by step, paying close attention to the wire position and color via the manual itself. So the first ones that we have to assemble are actually what we call the position sensors. What this is your limit and homing sensors themselves. Now, a lot of the cheaper machines out there have basically just click style switches, which just use a little spring in them. This one uses magnetic sensors, highly accurate in repositioning itself. There's a total of 6 of them, 2 for each axis, which would be its minimum and maximum extents. Let's go ahead and roll through them on the machine themselves. Now, when you home the machine, what it has to do is when you first turn it on, it needs to know where the head position is. So in order for it to do this, it needs to drive itself over to find one side. And so when it sees that switch trigger, it goes, hey, okay, I know I'm all the way to the left side and I've got 150 millimeters of travel to this side. If it didn't know that position, it wouldn't know where to start printing and move in different directions and where to stop. It could start printing way over here, thinking this is the center of the bed when this is the center of the bed. That's what these switches do. And sometimes if you had an error where you lost resolution or you lost steps on a stepper motor, it could actually drive the machine over into the side of the bed and actually damage itself. And that's why we have them and we utilize them as a limit switch. So if it thinks it's here and it's actually here and it moves over, it'll hit the switch and it'll shut itself down before it actually damages or breaks a belt or hurts the rest of the equipment. So like I mentioned, there's a total of 6 of them. So if we take a look at them right over here, this is our y-axis. We've got one here and here. In here, we've got them on the back side. They're right here and here, over here. And our magnetic pickups are right here and right here for those. And well, I've got it reversed right here for a z-axis, right here and right here are these limit switches. Now you're also going to notice on these switches, we'll talk about it a little bit later in the troubleshooting, how they have a slot and some screws. There's some adjustment that you have right in here to get this refined within this bed. They are set from the factory, but with any build, there's definitely some tweaking that you may want to do. It's not necessary, but just be aware these switches are adjustable to increase your bed area slightly if you needed to. In order to do that, you need to know exactly what you're doing to be able to push this machine beyond its intended capabilities, but here's where you'd make those adjustments themselves. So with that explained, let's go ahead and talk about the 6 wires coming up to the front. So these wires are really easy to know, especially if you're in the RC industry. These look just like RC servo leads. 3 wires, red, black, and white. Same as an RC. We've got a 5-volt signal, a ground, and a white wire, which is our signal itself. I'm sorry, 5-volt ground and signal wire. It said signal wire on that. So 2 for each one. So if we take a look at them, as long as none of the cabling was damaged, I mean not the cabling, but the paper that with the indicator on there, we know this is our Y minimum, and then there should be a Y maximum. There's going to be a total of 6. If any of these have fallen off, you're going to be able to just trace these wires back on up and go, oh, here it is. I know this is my y-axis and this is the max extent this way. So you'll be able to identify it that way as well. But let's just go ahead and find the total of 6 wires here. Okay, there we go. So super simple. Just find the red, black, and white wires. They're the only ones really like that in here that look like servo leads. Total of 6 of them, and just bring them onto the front. Make sure you bring all these little paper tags up here towards the front on all of them so you can see clearly what it is. And we're going to follow the instructions one by one right on through to match the control panel. So I'm going to bring the control panel right over here so that you're going to be able to see it. We're going to lay it out just like it shows right here in the manual itself. And I'm going to turn that around because it's actually upside down. And so it's these sets of pins right over here. You're going to notice the first set of pin is actually 4. We're going to disregard that. We're going to start with the first 3 pin section and work a section right on over, right off the manual itself. So the first one is Z max followed by Z min. So if we look at Z, we found Z here and Z maximum. So give me some slack. I'm going to slide this on in right over here. Now we're going to take a look at the coloring. White is towards the top right over here. Well, actually, since I have this upside down, it's the bottom for me. But white is towards the bottom, and the red is towards the top, which is towards the fan itself. So the first one is max, so we're just going to go ahead and plug that right on in. Red towards top, white towards the bottom. I'm going to roll that over so you can see this is the top towards the fan, and this is the bottom. Red towards the top, based off the picture right into the manual itself. Next is minimum. Just going to follow the same coloring on that. Right there, followed by Y, max min. So let's find those. Y, here's minimum. Y maximum. So there we go. And there we go. And just through deduction, all that's left is X, so max, minimum again. Those are max, and there should be one more in here, right there. And plugged on in. So those are our 6 wires for our sensors themselves, so our limit and homing switches. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step and have a look. Now the next ones that we need to address are the two temperature sensors. Now temperature sensors aren't critical on direction because it's a variable resistor depending on the heat applied to it. So there's no polarity. It doesn't matter what the color is. All we need to know is the position on the board itself and plug it in accordingly. Now there's two sensors. There's one that's on the bed to maintain the bed temperature for the heated bed, and one for the extrusion head itself. And we had talked about this a little earlier, denoting on the type of material, whether it be PLA or ABS, could have different temperature ranges as well. So if we take a look right over here, right above, headed towards the top of the back of this panel, so this being the top, we can see here is our two sensor wires right here. And if we look at the row of pins, there's a total of 6, and what we want is the 4 that is denoting going towards our power bus bar right over here. So we want right here these 4 wires. The first two going towards the power bar is our extruder temperature, and the second is our bed temperature. Now the extruder temperature is that wiring set that came down along to the bottom and forward that we put in this big loom right over here. Easy to denote which one it is because it has the little piece of paper on it, but it's also the one that's 2 wires with no color coding on it. Like I mentioned, it wasn't polarity on it, makes no difference. Now the other one is actually still taped up here to the bed. What we need to do is go ahead and pull these wires on down from the bed itself. Go ahead and get these untangled from each other. There we go. Now these wires are for the heating element, and here is the sensor wires, just the black ones. Now what I would like to do, I always like to have the clean setup, and normally these are just run and dropped into the bottom. What I'm going to do is bring them down, and there is a hole right here in the back plate. So I'm going to take these wires and put them through the back plate and bring them right through to the bottom and just pull them through. And that's going to make sure that these cables aren't going to get bound up over on this power supply. So then just bring them forward and on through right there. So I'm going to just set the power wires aside, and here we go. Here is our heat bed temperature sensor. Following this right here, the heat bed is the middle 2, and our extruder, which was this wiring harness, was the first 2 going towards the bus bar right over here. So we just plug those in right like that. So let's move on to the next ones. Next page right here, we're still on 2.11. And what we're going to do is the stepper motors and their position. The stepper motors are very easy to denote. There's a total of 4 stepper motors. You have 3 for driving the machine around, and the 4th is for the extruder nozzle itself. So we got 1, 2, 3, and number 4, which is our extruder. These are easy to tell because it comes in a set of 4 wires, and they're all color coordinated right there. So all we got to do is figure out which one is which and plug it into the according slot. So I'm going to flip the page on back because it denotes exactly which one is what. So we got X, Y, Z, and E for extruder. So let's go ahead and start with the E for the extruder. We'll just find which one says extruder, X, Y, Z, and extruder is in our harness right over here. E0. Now we got our 4 wires. We got blue, yellow, green, and red on this. And if we just note right here, red goes towards the bus bar right over here, the power bus bar. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug that straight on in right there, with red going to that direction. Next, let's just go ahead and start over here at Z. So I'll find the one that says Z. Z. And the same, red on all of these. The red, the starting one, is going towards the bus bar. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug that in right there. Z, followed by Y. And then X. There we go. So the majority of the wires at this point are plugged on in, and we've got no problems with that right there. So let's go ahead and move on to the next ones. All right, so now following the manual, our next step is actually moving over to what I call the bus bar or the power bar. In these connectors are a little bit different from our standard push-on style pins. These ones are designed to handle a little bit more current. And they do that by screwing down and clamping on the wire and crushing the wire in a little clamp right over here. So we have a screw that's on top, and when it's threaded down and the wire is inserted, it crushes, makes really good contact mechanically as well as electrically. But it's very critical that we install these correctly so that we don't have stray wires making contact or anything like that. So let's go ahead and go through these one by one. First one per the instructions is our D10 block right over here, which is D10. And what this is the output for our heater on our extruder right over here. So this is probably the highest current load on the system itself, which heats this extruder, which melts the plastic so it can be injected out or squirted on out. So it's these first two right here. So what we want to first do is go ahead and put our screwdriver that comes with the essential kit, and it's a real nice thin so it fits right in here with no problems. And we're going to unthread these all the way. You're going to know that it's unthreaded all the way because you're going to be able to hear it click and ratchet as the screw is out and drops back in. Let's go ahead and hear that. Right there. And what that ensures is that this hole in the bottom has been opened up all the way for us to insert these wires. Now this is the heater element. They're really easy to denote because these are the thick red wires. The thickest and heaviest duty wire in here, like I was mentioning, is the biggest load, secondary to the heating bed itself. Now, it goes through a process that explains stripping the wire off. Yours should come stripped. If it doesn't come pre-stripped, what you need to do is just cut off some of this insulation, making sure not to cut any of the wires, and stripping it off to a preset amount right there in the manual itself. But it's going to look just like that. One thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and give these a twist. What you don't want, I'm going to do it to this side over here, is something like this and trying to jam it in the hole. Problem is when you put it in the hole, what you're going to have happen is some of the wires will go in the hole, and you have then little stray wires that are popping out right over here. Since these wires are basically right next to each other, they could actually make contact and create a short or problems later on. So we don't want that. So we're going to pull them up and give them a nice twist so that it's a nice clean wire set. Now these, since it's a heater, it's just basically a resistor with current going through it. It doesn't matter as far as polarity is concerned. They're both red in this case. So we've loosened up both the D blocks right over here. We're going to go ahead and install this wire till the end of this insulation just is barely inserted into the plastic itself. Now we're going to thread this down until we feel it make contact. As soon as it makes contact, what we want to do is then go one full turn to give this a proper crush and mechanical connection. So I'm going to go ahead and take the first wire, just insert it into the hole, and I'm going to move out of the way so we can get a nice shot right into there. It goes right into there. I'm just going to insert it into the insulation, just barely comes into the plastic. I don't want to jam this all the way in. The problem is if we do that, we're going to start crushing the insulation and not the wire itself. And we want a good electrical connection with the wire. So just make sure the insulation just barely goes into the plastic. I'm going to go ahead and thread this on down. Okay, I felt it make contact. You can feel the screw all of a sudden just get a little tighter because what we're doing now is making contact with the wires themselves. And as soon as it makes contact, we're going to go one full revolution. And at the end of that one revolution, it should be pretty tight. At that point, inspect to make sure you had no stray little wires shoot on out, and give it a little tug right in there and make sure it's not going to slip out. If everything is good, just go ahead and move on to the other one. Okay, there we go. Okay, move on to the second wire, give it a tug and inspect and make sure that one's great. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to our next block right here, which is D9. Now D9 is controlling for your cooling fans, which are these two fans right here on the top. The reason we want to be able to control these is depending on the type of plastic, as well as what layer you're on. Like the first couple layers, you don't want to cool those layers. You want them to adhere to the plate itself. And then later on you turn the fan on as it gets cooler or different speeds. We need to be able to control this essentially. And we do that basically through this power bar. Even though it's not super high current, this same ramps board 1.4 could actually control a secondary extruder through this output. So it depends on how it was set up. This particular one is set up to control our cooling fans. So let's go ahead and find our two cooling fans. Since the cooling fans are up here on the head, obviously the wires were put into this black loom. So if we bring our wires on down and take a look at this loom, right here, here is D9, here's D9. You can see how tiny these little wires are. Now you notice that there is black and red, so these are polarity, meaning that we do have to make sure positive goes in positive, negative, negative. Now positive is always red with the plus, black is always, or negative is always black with a negative sign. And if we take a look right over here on our thing, and in our schematic where it denotes right over here, it shows negative right here and a positive. So that's negative, that's positive with a plus. So positive is red. So what we need to do is put these two wires together. We want to strip these wires back a little bit, twist the wires together so it's a little bit bigger wire itself. Go ahead and insert it and thread this on down, and do it with the black one as well. So we're going to go ahead and group these two wires together, stripping back a little bit of the insulation so we have more wire exposed. We can fold it over itself, create a real nice mechanical bond. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, so now I have these two sets of wires stripped back 7mm like it says in the instructions. I twisted them together and I actually just kind of folded them over on top of each other, which gives us a really nice thick wire for these clamps to go ahead and get a hold of. And like it mentions, it is polarity, meaning red is positive, black is negative. And if we take a look at block D9 right here, first one is going to be our negative followed by the positive. So I'm going to go ahead and take the black wire and just go ahead and follow the same step that we followed over here. Insert the wire till the insulation just barely is covered by the green plastic, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten it down. One full revolution once we feel that it makes contact. Okay, it made contact right there. There we go. Give it a tug and we are good, and that is followed by the positive. Contact. There we go. And give it a nice tug. We check for any stray wires, and perfect. Now we're on to block D8. Now D8 is the output for the heater of the heating bed itself. So the wires were the ones that we pulled through the back plate right here and came forward with the temperature sensor earlier. And it's these silicone wires right there, and it says D8 heated print bed. So same deal, we've got positive and negative on this one, and this one does have polarity. Even though it's just running current through here, there are some LEDs right here on the back that denote when it is being heated itself for safety reasons. So we want to make sure that we get polarity correct on that. Red is for positive, black is for negative once again. Pre-stripped on theirs. If yours isn't stripped enough, you can go ahead and just cut that on back. What's nice about these are pre-tinned, so the wires, you're not going to have to worry about any fraying on those. So same thing that we did as the other ones. We're going to just loosen these screws up till it clicks right there. Right there. And following right here, in the next one, it's going to be a D8, which is ground. We're going to put it in just till the insulation goes into the green. Tighten it up until it makes contact. Right there, and then one full revolution. Check it, nice and tight. Same with the positive, which will be the last one, the furthest towards the top. Plug it in. Made contact, and then one revolution. Right there, nice and tight. That's almost 99% of it. We are almost done. So that is all the wiring, and it looks like a mess, but we went through them one by one and made it very simple. What we are left with right here is the power connection from our power supply. Now this power connection provides 12 volts at 29 amps to the control module, the RAMP's 1.4 board, which then handles all the drivers for the motors, the fans, the heaters, everything from that situation. So it's got dual output on this, running two separate circuits, but it's pre-wired and nothing you need to worry about. But we added active cooling for the stepper motors because we actually have a fairly large motor here on the back for our Z axis. Because of that, we wanted active cooling with these 2 amp drivers with the aluminum heat sinks. So we need to attach this one to this wire set, and that is just going to apply power to this fan, and so anytime it's turned on, this fan is actively running. We didn't want it tied to this one, which would mean the fan only comes on when these fans are used, which isn't necessarily what we want. So what we need to do is, just to know, we got black and we got red. We've got black and red. We just need to loosen up 2 of these. It doesn't matter which one. Just loosen those up. We're going to insert them in and tighten it right on back down. All we need to do is then just plug this into here. And when you insert it, you're going to want to insert it to where it is flush, all the way flush right here on the gap, right here and here. And that is it as far as this is concerned and wiring it up. All we're going to then do is rotate, and we've got some installation screws that we're going to put in onto the side and 2 from the inside coming forward on that. And we're almost done with the printer itself. So let me go ahead and go through this step. Just watch along as I do it and just install it, and we are pretty much done with this step. Now, due to the length of these cables, I'm going to kind of do it right on over in here. I'm going to just pick up these 2 outer ones, which are the top ones. I'm just going to loosen those up a little bit. I'm not going to pull those wires out. I'm just simply going to insert the new ones right on in, so you can have a look at that. It's installed, red into red, black into black. And just tighten those back up. As soon as it makes contact again, 1 full revolution, same with the other one. What you want to do is just go ahead and give these a tug, make sure that they're in there, and the original wires, give them a tug and make sure those are nice and tight as well. So that is it. I'm just going to go ahead and plug this on in, make sure it seats all the way, seated all the way in there, and we are done with this wiring harness. So I'm going to just take this panel out and just kind of rotate it into place, and as I'm rotating it into place, I'm just going to check these wires and make sure we're not going to pinch anything. Now, I had cut these zip ties a little earlier just so that I could pull these wires out to make it a little easier for installation. You guys are more than welcome to do that. You just now need to reinstall these wires. So what I'm going to do is start from the back and work forward, pulling these wires nice and tight and making this loom nice and clean coming up all the way to the front. Because what I don't want is the cluster of wires right back here blocking my airflow for these stepper drivers. And essentially we're just going to clean up this wiring coming forward using these provisions for the zip ties. And then when I'm done with that, we've got some screws right here on the front. We're going to just go ahead and install. And then we got a couple screws from the inside coming forward that we're just going to go ahead and install right there. And we're done with this step. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Follow along with me in the video. All right, so I've taken some time and I went ahead and cleaned up my wiring harness. I went ahead and zip tied it back up in there. I cleaned up these wires a little bit with some extra zip ties I had, just because I like a nice tidy installation right on there. So now what we need to do is just go ahead and install this panel, but let's go ahead and refer right back to the manual and make sure we're on par with step-by-step of what we need to do. So we've installed the little wires for the cooling fan. We plugged in the power from the power supply into the back of the board right over here. We made sure it was nice and tight, fully seated right here per picture 2.11p. And we are right here onto the panel. So we're going to need 4 screws along the outside and 4 coming in from the inside. And I will tell you, these ones coming from the inside are a little bit of a bear to get to because of this rod. So you just got to be patient, and it's going to take a little bit of time doing that one. So let's go ahead and grab these screws. So the first ones are going to, of course, be our bigger ones, our 143s that we've been dealing with. And the other screws we have are 039s. I'm going to go ahead and start with the outside, but definitely do not tighten these ones up because these are tiny machine screws coming from the inside. Getting them lined up is really critical, and if you tighten these ones up, you will never get it lined up. All right. So taking our 2.5, I'm just going to go put that in there. Go ahead and just get these started. All right, and that is the last screw. Congratulations everyone, your 3D printer has now been successfully assembled. What we need to do at this point is do some operational checks. Make sure that we've got everything plugged in here correctly, make sure none of the wiring was damaged during the assembly process, as well as the mechanical motion, make sure that there's no binding. And then from there, what we need to do is set up the machine and get it prepped and ready for 3D printing. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is going to be our pre-operation checks and also do a little troubleshooting as well.